Greetings to my fellow peace blunderers, and today I'm coming at you with a very important middle game idea that doesn't get talked about enough in my opinion, which is a shame because boy can it sometimes save your skin. Today we're discussing how we can miraculously save certain positions being a lot of material down. Something tells me you guys are no strangers to being in that situation. Now, me also, of course, because the study that I'm about to show you is taken from the actual game that I played from Black's perspective here, and boy, did I not have a good time at all. Now, the actual game that I played went a slightly different path to the study. I only derived an idea from the game, but still, it's not going to matter much. Anyway, what you're seeing in front of you is me blundering a pawn and a fork for no reason whatsoever in a rapid game. It's white to play, and I think a lot of you guys will be able to see that this pawn is undefended, and after knight takes e6 that is begging to be played, it also comes forking my king and rook. Ouch. So quite predictably, king h8, knight takes f8, rook takes f8, I'm 3 points down in material in a flash, and I'm just, reaching for my napkins and calling my mom at this point. Anyway, so after 10 to 15 seconds of psychological torture that I'm inflicted on myself, I started thinking about time. And what I thought about was the following. Okay, so my opponent has just exchanged their last knight for one of my rooks. And if there is a positive to that, it's that the position, as you can see right now, is very close. There are still many pawns remaining, and it's quite blocked, which means that in theory the knight can be equal to the rook, maybe even better, so I'm not 100% upset. On top of that, what I'm also seeing is that my opponent has a dark squared bishop, whereas most of my pawns are on the light squares, which also makes me think it's not going to be very easy for my opponent to break through and attack some of my pawns. What also doesn't help my opponent is that they've got double backwards pawns on d3 and d4. Well, first of all, they're weak. At some point, maybe I can try and attack them, but arguably the more important part is that this kind of structure is not good for breakthroughs. As you can see, these pawns are never moving as long as my d5 pawn stays in place, and it's very difficult to get rid of that d5 pawn. Yeah, objectively, I am terribly losing. The engine is going to say something like +7. But I know it's a rapid game. I know that my opponent can mess up, just like I did a couple of moves ago. And anyway, just always play till mate. Always try to assess even the most horrible positions and try to make the best out of them. You never know what's going to happen. Now, I was pretty happy to see f4 on the board. Of course, I think f4 was played to prevent f4 from my end. So f4 does prevent f4 from black, but it has a major downside of blocking the position even more, which increases my chances of creating a fortress, an impenetrable structure, which regardless of how much more material you've got, is going to be very hard to utilize. And with that comes a little disclaimer. Note that these are not two professionals playing. It's a 2000 level game and it's a rapid game. So a lot of the moves are not going to be perfect by either player, but I can at least explain what I was thinking about and why my approach eventually kind of worked out. Now, after f4 on my end, I also tried to make the position a little bit more blocked. I played a6, putting my final pawn on a light square, making this bishop with regards to attacking completely obsolete and making breaks through b5 a little bit more difficult. And this is the moment when my opponent starts to get things a little bit wrong. You see, they went for the wrong long-term plan, at least in my opinion. Having the two rooks and playing against a knight in a close position is a bit of an uphill struggle sometimes. So what my opponent needs to do, and what the engine keeps recommending, is for my opponents to play h5. To play h5 to then put pressure on g6 and exchange the h pawn for the g pawn. And if you see what I'm talking about, let's say h5, I do something, a nothing move, then takes, and they get the open file to attack with. And that's the crucial thing. When you have the material imbalance in your favor so that you have a rook for, let's say, a knight, you've got to open the position up. This is the way to win, and this is what my opponent should have done. They didn't. They went for a different route, which cost them trouble. They played rook e1, and I was kind of surprised by that move. I was bracing myself for h5, opening things up, especially since my king is here. It makes even more sense. But when I saw rook e1, I was like, that must not be very good. I don't see how it threatens me. It just kind of gives me time. And rook e1 makes sense when you think of my opponent's future moves and when you finally decipher what the plan is about, but it's just the wrong plan, as I alluded to, but we're going to get to that. So I played queen b5 here, and the idea was, again, it's not the soundest idea, but it made sense from my perspective. I wanted to free up this square for the knight so that I can push this pawn forward, which did happen, and then I can hop with the knight on b6 and completely shut down the queen side as well. And funnily enough, I did manage to achieve that. I got kind of lucky because my opponent didn't play the most accurate moves, but this is just what happens in some games. You don't play accurately all the time. Your opponent doesn't do the same thing. So queen b3, connecting the rooks, and this is where I started suspecting even more and more that the plan is going to be to move the bishop away and double the rooks behind the pawn, which is, again, for a third time, I'm saying that in about a minute. This is the wrong plan, but again, we're about to see why. a5 from me, obviously the pawn is pinned if takes, and bye-bye queen, so can't really take that pawn. And I'm happy about that, because if I can get a4 in and then use my knight on b6 to protect a4, I think I'm very happy. I think I achieved my goal of closing the position down. e6, it's okay, doesn't bother me too much, I suppose. I play an intermezzo a4. Don't forget that the pawn is defended and now attacks the queen. You can take my knight, I'm going to take your queen, and this pawn ain't promoting. I'm covering the queen square, so that's okay. And yeah, I was quite happy to see that on the board. Queen c3 retreating, and my knight goes to b6. Now look at this. If the break coming with a4, b5 was possible a couple of moves ago, something like this and this, now we made sure that this is not going to happen. We've got the pawn there, we've got the knight there defending that pawn from behind. None of this is ever moving, it's completely immobilized. I am very happy. That said, again, h5, basically h5 is the best move, every move for white, but my opponent just never plays it. This is still +6 for white, don't get me wrong, but I'm just trying to do the best I can. Yeah, h5 is incredibly winning for the reason I explained. You opens up the files, yada yada yada. Now then, my opponent played bishop d2, which only confirmed my suspicions, and I was really happy to see bishop d2. Now, it's obvious, I think it's almost guaranteed now that they're going to double up the rooks behind the pawn and all that jazz, and it's about time I explain to you why this is the bad plan. And to some of you, I guess it's quite obvious already. Let's imagine this situation, okay? I get to play h5, and as soon as I play h5, by the way, this is not what happened in the game anymore. I played a different move and it led to a different ending. However, this is very important now. If h5 by black happens, and if white does not take en passant, opening things up a little bit, if white chooses to ignore it, after something like rook e3, following up their plan, the position is just a draw. It's just a draw. There is no way for white to break through. And what I'm talking about is the following. So, okay, for example, king g7, rook a to e1, achieving that setup. And what next? White has got 3 points worth of extra material, yet it does absolutely nothing. Let's break it down. What these points are. They have an extra pawn and they are open exchange. So it's not like they have an extra piece, The number of the pieces is the same, it's just that they have theoretically a better quality piece. Well, in that position, it's not better quality. In that position, I'm sorry, when it's blocked up like this, you would probably take a knight, half of the cases, if not most of the cases. And with regards to the extra pawn, why should I be afraid of e6? Why? This pawn is not moving anywhere. And this is a typical example of a fortress. This bishop, being a dark squared bishop completely stuck behind its pawns, can do absolutely nothing. And my queen can stay on this square for as long as it wants. My knight can stay on this square for as long as it wants. My bishop is definitely going to stay because it's blockading the pass pawn. And the engine, if I switch it on, is going to tell you that white is better. White, according to the engine, as I'm looking at it right now, has a +1 advantage. But the problem is, this advantage is the engine advantage. This advantage never leads to a win. The engine is just going to offer you repetitions and moves that do nothing, and it only provides white with an advantage because of that extra material. In reality, all that's going to happen is that I am going to move my rook from f8 to e8 to f8 back and forth, and there is no breakthrough for white at all. Again, all of my pawns are on the light squares, blocking up the position very nicely. The pawn on a4 is protected twice by my queen and by my knights and cannot really be attacked more than twice. It cannot really be attacked even more than once, because I don't see how these rooks will ever attack my pawn. The only piece that can realistically attack it is the queen, but come on, you're never really gonna take the pawn with the queen when it's defended like that. And my bishop is also not only blockading the pawn, crucially, but is very good at controlling the c5 square. The dark squared bishop will never get to the c5 square. The only thing that I can possibly think of, which I don't think is going to work, is that if the rook tries to go to c5, it sacrifices itself for an exchange with bishop takes rook on c5. And I think even if I were to take the rook on c5 with my bishop, this pawn would then be kind of weak. I think I can round it up and take the pawn as well, and then the material is going to be equal. The position is going to be hopefully equal as well. So I guess doesn't help. And yeah, guys, I know that we are talking if, buts, and maybes. For example, again, white is very easily winning if after h5, they simply take en passant, opening the position up. It's +5 for white. White is winning because white is eventually going to attack down that file and cause me a lot of trouble. But, you know, anything can happen in the game, and you've got to be ready for it, and you've got to create the platform for these possibilities to happen. You have a knight against a rook, you're trying to close the position down, hoping that your opponent slips up. When you've got a rook against a knight again, you're trying to open things up. Something that my opponent hasn't done in a number of moves, went for a completely different strategy, which just doesn't work. And that's the thing. You commit 5 moves, also trying to make a plan work. You play rook e1, you play bishop d2, you play queen b3, you connect the rooks, and then you double them up behind the pawn. And then committing so much time to it, you realize it just doesn't work. The pawn is immovable. It's not going anywhere. So yeah, guys, understand the material imbalances on the board, understand the specifics of your pieces, and base your long-term strategy on these features of your pieces and of the imbalances, I mean. Yeah, let me know in the comments below if you ever built any fortresses, and if you just happened to find this video useful, please like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitch. I stream Tuesdays, Thursdays and Sundays. Find me on chess.com, join our Discord, all that good stuff, and I'm going to talk to you very soon. My favorite unintentional gambiteers. Love you all. See ya in the next one.